There are people out there with more challenges than just the pandemic. For example, those getting through this living with OCD. Acronyms come and abound, but the person who can explain to us what it all means is the good doctor, Dr. John Braccio, drjohnb.com. That's the website and the podcast, Regional Psychological Services, East Lansing. Good morning, sir. Welcome back.
Well, good morning to you, Dave. And OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is really a difficult condition under any circumstances.
Tell us what that is exactly, so listeners know what that is.
I'm going to do that. It's basically when a person has obsessive thoughts, and in order to resolve the obsessive thoughts, they need to do something. They need to have a compulsion. One that we think of often are those that wash their hands over and over again, or keep checking to make sure the stove is off, or make sure the door is locked, or make sure that everything is in exactly the right symmetrical way, okay? So it's a very difficult situation, and when you have the pandemic, it even can lead to more things, because let's say you're a germophobic or you're a person who is always worried about contamination. It can lead to far greater issues than even the condition itself, which can be actually debilitating. And it's when it's in its worst forms. But we're looking at people that hoard. We're looking at people that are constantly washing their hands. We look at the people that check everything. We look at people that, in putting their clothes in the closet, they may spend a half hour getting to what they consider exactly right. And if they don't do this, then they become highly anxious, and unless they go through with a ritual or they go through with the compulsion, they can't relieve their anxiety. So this becomes something that they really believe. People can have panic attacks, and it's a really difficult thing. I've worked with people, Dave, over the years, like people that will kind of hop into from one room to another room. It's just kind of what they do, or they will put their hand through their hair every 10, 15, 20 seconds. They'll stamp their feet, things that you might not even notice. But if you're with the person a while, you begin to notice them. But in my work, it's quite common to have people come in that do really have these OCD conditions. And the worst thing, they tend to come back. They tend to be things you have to work at, oftentimes your whole life. And it's easy to pick up new ones if you have that tendency. So it's a difficult condition on its own. And then if you add the pandemic of people, the fears of being in homes, the fear of germs, the fears of contagion, contamination, it can be a very, very, very difficult condition. It is for many people right now as we're talking on the phone.
And these can still be people that have, can be successful. I remember Laura Hillebrand, who wrote the book Seabiscuit, and she couldn't leave her house. She's like, one of the things I've got to do, I've got to write, I've got to find ways to activate, because I have a desperate fear of leaving my own home and having anything that's out of order. And she was still successful, but it was a challenge. But there are ways for people to approach this and try to get things in better balance. But one thing is, not losing social contact, right? That's important.
Well, it's clear you cannot be a social isolate. You really do need to have contact with people. Okay. You need to talk. You need to meet your own basic physical and emotional needs. You cannot not be eating. You cannot be sleeping. You have to make sure that you're really caring for yourself. And getting sleep is really a very critical thing. Exercise is something very important. I think you want to eliminate news, people, and other things that cause high anxiety and disruption, in your routine. You also need to be constantly using self-talk and cognitive restructuring, where you're kicking out these negative thoughts. You've got to be saying, look, I'm not going to die. This is, a probability of this COVID, even if I had to catch it, is going to be very, very low. And if you are in a higher probability range, you want to be taking the precautions that you need to be taking, social distance in terms of washing your hands in a realistic way, not touching your face, and wearing a mask. We just have to do what's reasonable within the confines of reality. Everything is dangerous. A meteor could hit your house today, this type thing. So we just, there are things we can do, but we have to work at it. And also,
no, see, Doc, you tell me that, and I chuckle and I laugh. I go, yeah, you're right. Someone else may go, really? Is that true? how much of a chance, and then they get anxious about it. I mean, even things like that would tend to, that break up that order, could set the anxious syndrome off with people who are challenged by this.
Well, you see, you're absolutely right. You have to remember, it's not reasonable. There are people that check the gas content in any building they're in. There are people that can tell you exactly how many beetles are in the meat of hamburgers, okay, and McDonald's.
Oh boy.
I've known people, and I've seen people, even in restaurants, kind of picking around the food, making sure everything is just right, whatever exactly that means. So it's really a very difficult situation to have, and you can't always talk to people. I mean, what if you tell someone, I really have to hop out of a room in order for me not to get highly anxious? The person's going to say, really? But those are just the kind that are not walking on cracks and sidewalks. And I might add, too, having a sense of spirituality, coming closer to your spiritual beliefs can be very helpful during this type of a difficult thing. My Lord is my shepherd. I mean, I think these are things that we can do, but also doing is something important too. Just not feeding into the compulsion, not doing it, resisting the anxiety, and then over time it does go away. It's confronting the problem. It's desensitizing yourself. Very similar to what we do with other phobias, plane phobias, height phobias, call it whatever you will.
What is your best tip for people who are around either a work team who have regular encounters with those who are challenged by OCD? What is the best way to not exacerbate a situation? What should they know about the pitfalls of maintaining a positive relationship when you know that someone else has OCD?
I think we try to be supportive. We don't mock the person. We don't just say, get over it.
Good.
It's really no big deal. We really have to be aware it's a condition, and it's a set of beliefs. And people that are this way, they really, even if they know it's not true, their mind does not allow them to overcome it. And in the workplace or anywhere, we see this. There are people we know that have to have paper clips in a very certain order. You can if you're around people that have this and you're slightly, even a little bit tuned into it, you can see it. We just try to be supportive. And sometimes people can survive with these, we call them what you will, these OCD traits. They can get by. Yes. The problem is they often can add new things. That it's a proclivity, to use the old Catholic word. It's a proclivity or a tendency, modern words, that if you have this tendency for whatever the reason, you tend to pick up more unless you eliminate the one or those that you have. So it's critical. Try to get over this. And it usually does start in adolescence, sometimes with girls a little later. But it's when you've got over 2% of the population that have it at one time or another, that's maybe a small percentage, but it's a vast number of people when you really consider 2%. So yeah, it's pretty serious thing, and it can be a devilish thing to have because it can be so destructive. I had a person come in to see me for an assessment some years ago. She said, "Well, Dr. Braccio, you should feel lucky," and she kind of chuckled. She said, "I am really anxious. I normally take a half hour to get my, this is still a one-bedroom apartment. It takes me a half hour to get everything exactly right, but I knew I had to come here today." And I said, "Well, good. This is step one in getting over that," even though it had nothing to do with why we were meeting. But that was, that's what
that's good. At least there was a positive step moment to get things going. I mean, that's always a good thing. I want to remind listeners here that they can join the doctor and yours truly. I'll be facilitating. He'll be presenting at a virtual healthcare forum for the Lansing Regional Chamber, and that will be Thursday at 11 a.m. You can find out more about this going to the events section at lansingchamber.org. This particular topic will be a portion of it, but certainly not limited to, and for people participating, your questions and answers as well. We look forward to that. Again, that's Thursday the 12th at 11 a.m., lansingchamber.org. Dr. John Braccio, drjohnb.com is the website. The podcast will be there dealing with the challenges of OCD in a pandemic. It can be a bit of a double down, but knowing about it and working towards modifying that behavior is a big part of the battle. It's always good to have you on, Doc.
Always a pleasure, Dave. I'll be chatting with you shortly for sure on Thursday.
And we will. Yep, we will indeed. We're back in a moment here on 1320 WILS.